Marcus Thompson had always been the type of person who believed rules didn't apply to him. At 28 years old, he owned a successful tech startup and drove a bright red Ferrari that cost more than most people's houses. Money had given him confidence, but it had also given him something much more dangerous, the belief that he could get away with anything. On that crisp October morning in London, Marcus was already running late for an important business meeting. His phone kept buzzing with messages from investors who were waiting for him at a high-end restaurant near Buckingham Palace. The traffic was terrible, and Marcus could feel his patience wearing thin as he sat in his expensive car, watching the minutes tick by. "This is ridiculous," he muttered to himself, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. His meeting was worth millions of dollars, and he couldn't afford to be late. That's when he noticed the clear road that ran alongside Buckingham Palace. The road that was clearly marked with signs indicating it was restricted for royal use only. Marcus had driven past those signs hundreds of times before, but today was different. Today, he was desperate, and desperate people make foolish decisions. He glanced around quickly, checking for police cars, and then made a sharp turn onto the restricted road. The Ferrari's engine roared as he accelerated, feeling satisfied with his clever solution to the traffic problem. The road was smooth and empty, exactly what he needed. Marcus allowed himself a small smile as he imagined arriving at his meeting right on time, impressing the investors with his punctuality. He reached for his phone to send a quick text message, taking his eyes off the road for just a moment. When he looked up again, his heart nearly stopped. There, directly in front of him, stood two royal guards in their iconic red uniforms and tall black hats. They were positioned at attention, completely motionless, as if they were carved from stone. Marcus slammed on his brakes, but he was going too fast. The Ferrari skidded across the asphalt, leaving black tire marks as it slid toward the guards. Time seemed to move in slow motion. Marcus watched in horror as his car continued sliding, completely out of control. The two guards remained perfectly still, their faces expressionless beneath their ceremonial hats. They didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't even blink as 2 tons of Italian engineering bore down on them. At the last possible second, Marcus managed to jerk the steering wheel hard to the right. The Ferrari spun around twice before coming to a stop, just inches away from the guards. The engine died with a pathetic sputter, and suddenly the only sound was Marcus's heavy breathing and the rapid beating of his heart. For a long moment, nobody moved. Marcus sat frozen in his driver's seat, his hands still gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. The two guards remained at attention, as if nothing had happened at all. Their discipline was so complete that they hadn't even turned their heads to look at the car that had nearly killed them. Marcus's hands were shaking as he turned off the engine and slowly opened his car door. The reality of what had almost happened was starting to sink in. He had nearly run down 2 royal guards. Not just any guards, but the Queen's own personal protectors. These weren't ordinary security officers. These were elite soldiers, chosen for their unwavering dedication and discipline. I'm so sorry," Marcus stammered as he stepped out of his car. His legs felt weak, and his expensive suit was already damp with sweat. "I didn't mean, the traffic was terrible, and I was late for a meeting." The guards said nothing. They continued to stand at perfect attention, their eyes focused straight ahead. Their silence was more terrifying than any shouting or anger would have been. Marcus had expected them to yell at him, maybe even arrest him on the spot. Instead, they acted as if he didn't even exist. "Please," Marcus continued, his voice getting higher with panic. "I know I shouldn't have been on this road. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I'll move my car right now and—" One of the guards finally moved. It was such a small movement that Marcus almost missed it, just a slight turn of the head, barely noticeable. But when their eyes met, Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The guard's expression was completely neutral, showing no emotion whatsoever. It was like looking into the eyes of a statue. The guard's partner remained motionless, but Marcus could sense that both men were now fully aware of his presence. Their training had taught them to notice everything while appearing to notice nothing at all. They had sized up the situation in seconds, cataloging every detail about Marcus, his car, and his obvious panic. Marcus tried to speak again, but his throat felt dry. The silence stretched on, broken only by the distant sound of London traffic and the occasional tourist's camera clicking from somewhere beyond the palace gates. He realized that people were probably watching this entire scene unfold. maybe even recording it on their phones. "Look," Marcus said, trying to regain some of his usual confidence. "I'm a businessman. I pay my taxes. I contribute to society. This was just a simple mistake. Surely we can work something out like reasonable people." Still, the guards said nothing. Their silence was absolute, professional, and deeply unnerving. Marcus had built his career on being able to talk his way out of problems, to charm and negotiate his way to success. But these men were immune to his usual tactics. They were like human fortresses, completely impenetrable. As the seconds ticked by, Marcus began to understand that he had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. This wasn't about traffic laws or parking tickets. He had violated something much more serious. He had trespassed on royal property and nearly harmed the Queen's guards in the process. In their world, such things were unforgivable. The weight of his situation began to settle on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. This wasn't going to be solved with money or smooth talking. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Thompson had encountered people who couldn't be bought, impressed, or manipulated. He was completely out of his depth, and the worst part was that he had no idea what was going to happen next. All he could do was stand there in the shadow of Buckingham Palace, watching two immovable guards who held his fate in their perfectly disciplined hands. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. Marcus could hear his own breathing, unnaturally loud in the quiet air around Buckingham Palace. His expensive watch ticked away the seconds, each one feeling more precious than the last as he realized his $1 million meeting was now completely forgotten. Finally, one of the guards moved again. This time, it wasn't just a glance. Guard Williams, whose nameplate Marcus could now see clearly, took a single step forward. It was a precise, measured movement that somehow managed to convey both authority and threat, without any obvious aggression. "Sir," Williams said, his voice calm and professional, with a crisp British accent that cut through the air like a knife. "You are currently on restricted royal property. Please explain your presence here." Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. At least now they were talking. He could work with talking. "Thank you for giving me a chance to explain," he said, trying to inject some of his usual charm into his voice. "Like I said, I'm a businessman, Marcus Thompson. Maybe you've heard of Thompson Tech Solutions. We're quite successful, actually. Featured in Forbes last month." The guard's expression didn't change. His partner, Guard Davies, remained perfectly still. But Marcus could sense that both men were listening to every word, analyzing every gesture. Their training had taught them to read people like books, and Marcus was clearly an open page. "I was on my way to an incredibly important meeting," Marcus continued, gaining confidence as he spoke. "Investors from Japan, worth about £50 million to my company. The traffic was absolutely terrible. And I noticed this road was empty. I know it was wrong, but I was desperate. Surely you can understand that sometimes business requires quick thinking and creative solutions." "Creative solutions," Williams repeated, his tone completely neutral. "Is that what you call nearly running down 2 members of Her Majesty's Guard?" Marcus felt his confidence crumble again. No, of course not. That was an accident. I would never intentionally. I have nothing but respect for the royal family and everyone who serves them. This was just a terrible misunderstanding." Davies finally spoke, his voice even more clipped than his partner's. "A misunderstanding that could have resulted in serious injury or death, but it didn't," Marcus said quickly. "No one was hurt. My car stopped in time, and I'm here apologizing and taking full responsibility for my mistake." "Surely that counts for something." The 2 guards exchanged a look that lasted less than a second, but Marcus caught it. They were communicating without words, the way partners do after years of working together. Whatever they had decided, Marcus was certain he wasn't going to like it. "Mr. Thompson," Williams said, pulling out a small radio from his belt. "I'm going to need you to remain exactly where you are while I contact my supervisor. Do not move toward your vehicle. Do not attempt to leave. Do you understand?" Panic began to rise in Marcus's chest again. "Wait, is that really necessary? We're all reasonable people here. I've apologized sincerely. I'm clearly no threat to anyone. Can't we just work this out between us?" "Sir," Davies said firmly, "you will remain where you are." William spoke quietly into his radio. using codes and numbers that Marcus didn't understand. The conversation was brief, but Marcus could tell from the guard's tone that whatever he was reporting was being taken very seriously on the other end. While they waited, Marcus tried one more approach. "Gentlemen, I want you to know that I have enormous respect for what you do. The discipline, the dedication. It's truly remarkable. I've actually been thinking about making a donation to military charities. Perhaps we could discuss." "Mr. Thompson," Williams interrupted, his voice carrying a warning. "I would advise you to remain silent." Marcus fell quiet, but his mind was racing. This was spiraling out of control faster than he could have imagined. What had started as a simple shortcut was turning into something much more serious. He began to wonder if he should call his lawyer, but realized that pulling out his phone might be seen as another threatening gesture. After about 10 minutes, Marcus heard the sound of approaching vehicles. 2 black cars with tinted windows pulled up behind his Ferrari, followed by a van marked with official government plates. Marcus's heart sank as he watched several people in suits get out of the cars, along with what appeared to be additional security personnel. A woman in a dark blue suit walked toward them with the confident stride of someone accustomed to authority. She had graying hair pulled back in a severe bun, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. When she reached the group, Williams and Davies both gave her a small, respectful nod. "I'm Commander Sarah Mitchell," she said, addressing Marcus directly. "Metropolitan Police, Royal Protection Unit." "I understand you've had quite an eventful morning, Mr. Thompson." Marcus tried to smile, but it felt forced and weak. "Commander Mitchell, thank you for coming. I'm sure your guards here have explained that this was just a simple mistake. Wrong place, wrong time. I'm more than happy to compensate for any inconvenience I've caused." Commander Mitchell studied him for a long moment. "Compensate," she repeated thoughtfully. "That's an interesting word choice, Mr. Thompson. Tell me, what do you think would be appropriate compensation for nearly running down 2 royal guards?" Well, I didn't actually run anyone down," Marcus said defensively. "My car stopped in time. No one was injured. Only because these 2 men have the discipline to remain at their posts even when facing immediate physical danger," Mitchell replied. "Lesser-trained individuals might have moved, possibly causing an even more serious accident. Their restraint quite possibly saved lives this morning, including your own." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face as he began to understand the full implications of what had happened. These weren't just guards standing around for show. They were highly trained protectors who had risked their own lives by not abandoning their posts when his car came sliding toward them. "I never thought of it that way," he said quietly. "I'm truly sorry. I can see now how serious this is." Commander Mitchell nodded slowly. "Good. That's the first intelligent thing you've said since I arrived. Now, Mr. Thompson, we need to discuss exactly what happens next." The way she said it made Marcus's stomach drop. This wasn't going to end with a warning and a handshake. Something told him that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't even imagine, and there was absolutely nothing his money or influence could do to stop it. Commander Mitchell gestured for Marcus to follow her to one of the black cars, while the other officials began examining his Ferrari and taking photographs of the tire marks on the Royal Road. The reality of his situation was becoming clearer with each passing minute, and none of it was good. "Mr. Thompson," Commander Mitchell began as they walked, "what you've done today goes far beyond a simple traffic violation. You've trespassed on royal property, endangered the lives of 2 royal guards, and demonstrated a complete disregard for national security protocols. These are not matters we take lightly." Marcus felt his knees go weak. "National security? I was just trying to get to a meeting. I never intended." "Your intentions are irrelevant," Mitchell interrupted. "The fact remains that you drove an unauthorized vehicle onto restricted royal property at high speed. For all we knew, you could have been a terrorist attempting to ram the palace gates." Our guards responded with remarkable restraint. They reached the car, and Mitchell opened a folder she had been carrying. Inside were several official-looking documents that made Marcus's heart race even faster. "I'm placing you under arrest pending a full investigation. You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you exercise that right until you've spoken with a solicitor." "Arrest?" Marcus's voice cracked. "Surely that's not necessary. I'm not a criminal. I'm a respected businessman with no criminal record." "One mistake that could have had catastrophic consequences," Mitchell said firmly. "Mr. Thompson, Do you have any idea what would have happened if you had actually struck those guards? The international incident alone would have been devastating. The media coverage, the diplomatic implications, the security review that would have followed. You would have single-handedly created a crisis that could have affected relations between multiple countries. Marcus stared at her, the full weight of his actions finally hitting him. He had been so focused on his own problems, his own meeting, his own convenience, that he had never considered the bigger picture. In his world of business deals and profit margins, he had forgotten that some things were more important than money. "I never thought," he started to say, then stopped. There was nothing he could say that would make this better. The arrest process was swift and professional. Marcus was handcuffed and placed in the back of one of the official vehicles while his Ferrari was impounded as evidence. As they drove away from Buckingham Palace, he caught a glimpse of guards Williams and Davies through the rear window. They had returned to their positions and stood once again at perfect attention, as if nothing had happened at all. The next few hours passed in a blur of police stations, paperwork, and phone calls to his very expensive legal team. His lawyers worked frantically to understand the charges against him and to negotiate some kind of deal. But it quickly became clear that this wasn't a situation that money could easily solve. The story broke on social media first. Someone had indeed filmed the entire incident on their phone, and within hours, videos of Marcus's near collision with the royal guards were trending worldwide. The footage was devastating. It clearly showed his reckless driving, the guards' incredible discipline under pressure, and his obvious panic afterward. The headlines were brutal. "Arrogant businessman nearly kills royal guards. Millionaire's shortcut turns into security nightmare." And worst of all, "You won't believe what this CEO did to the Queen's guards." The last headline was accompanied by his company photo and a detailed breakdown of his net worth, making him look even more privileged and out of touch. By evening, Marcus was released on bail, but the damage to his reputation was already catastrophic. His investors had seen the news coverage and immediately canceled their meeting. Several major clients began questioning whether they wanted to continue working with someone who showed such poor judgment and disrespect for authority. The legal consequences were severe but manageable with his team of lawyers. He faced hefty fines, community service, and a suspended sentence. But the social and professional consequences were far worse than anything the court could impose. Marcus's tech company, which he had built from nothing over 7 years, began to crumble almost overnight. Investors pulled out. Employees started looking for new jobs, and potential clients avoided him like he carried a plague. The man who had once been featured on magazine covers as a rising star in the tech world was now a social media laughingstock. 6 months later, Marcus found himself working at a small computer repair shop in a quiet suburb of London. His Ferrari had been sold to pay legal fees, his company had been dissolved, and his penthouse apartment was now just a memory. He lived in a modest flat above the repair shop and took the bus to work every day. But something unexpected had happened during those difficult months. Marcus had learned lessons that all his success and money had never taught him. He had learned about humility, respect, and the value of true discipline. He had also learned that some people, like guards Williams and Davies, possessed qualities that couldn't be bought or sold. On a cold February morning, almost exactly 4 months after the incident, Marcus made a decision that would have surprised his old self. He took a day off from work and traveled to Buckingham Palace, not in a Ferrari this time, but on foot. He carried with him a simple handwritten letter. He approached the main gate where tourists usually gathered and asked one of the officers if it would be possible to deliver a message to guards Williams and Davies. The officer was skeptical at first, but after Marcus explained who he was and what had happened, he agreed to pass along the letter. The letter was brief but sincere. Marcus thanked the guards for their professionalism and restraint on that terrible day. He acknowledged that they had probably saved his life by not moving when his car slid toward them. He apologized not just for his reckless driving, but for his attitude afterward, when he had tried to use his wealth and status to escape the consequences of his actions. Most importantly, he told them about how the incident had changed his life, not the professional destruction or financial losses, but the personal growth that had come from learning what true discipline and honor looked like. He explained that he was now working in a job that required patience and careful attention to detail, qualities he had never valued before but now considered essential. Marcus never received a response to his letter, nor had he expected one. The royal guards weren't in the habit of corresponding with members of the public, especially ones who had nearly run them down with expensive sports cars. But somehow, just writing the letter and delivering it had given him a sense of closure that all the lawyers and PR consultants in the world couldn't provide. As he walked away from the palace that day, Marcus realized that losing everything he thought mattered had actually saved him from a life of shallow pursuits and meaningless achievements. The guards had taught him something invaluable without saying a word. That true strength comes from discipline, respect, and putting duty before personal convenience. He would never again be the arrogant businessman who thought rules didn't apply to him. Instead, he was becoming something much better. A man who understood the value of honor and the importance of treating others with respect, regardless of their position in life. And in losing his fortune, Marcus Thompson had found something far more valuable: his character. The royal guards continued their duty as they always had, standing as symbols of unwavering dedication and discipline. They probably never thought about the incident again, but their example had changed one man's life forever. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come not from what people say, but from what they stand for, literally and figuratively, no matter what challenges come their way.